In Malaysia's jails, more than 1,200 prisoners are on death row.
Let him come back. Let him take me to the mosque. I want to hold him there.
But with the government reconsidering the death penalty, many hope their lives could be saved.
Some of us believe that killing is wrong. Once you believe in that, then you cannot allow the state to sponsor another killing.
Now a bitter backlash could see those hopes dashed.
Abolishing the death penalty protects only a small segment of people, and that is the criminals.
101 East meets the people on either side of this emotional life and death debate. We're in Yan, in Malaysia's northern state of Kedah. It feels like a sleepy town with a laid-back vibe. But an unspeakable crime happened here just months ago. The victims were 4-year-old Nurul Hanim and her brother, 1-year-old Muhammad Hafiz. They were killed in their beds, allegedly by a neighbor armed with a large knife. 6 months on, their parents are still in shock. Idris, a fisherman, was out at sea when the man rampaged through his house. He still doesn't know why.
Sebab sembang apa semua baik dengan saya. Kawan apa sembang tak ada masalah apa.
7-year-old Mohammed Hakim survived because he was sleeping in another room. His mother Sheila is lucky to be alive.
Tikam saya sempat elok lah kan. Mungkin kain batik tebal tu kan. Tak kena lah, mungkin luka sikit je. Saya terus pergi kat kak, saya tengok tulis belakang, saya tengok dia terus pergi kat anak. Lepas tu saya tak tahu apa yang jadi. Cuma minta tolong kak je.
Saya tak boleh lah.
The 2 children are buried near their home. The family visit regularly. It's a nightmare no parent should have to suffer. Idris and Sheila say they were relieved when the alleged murderer was arrested. But they are now alarmed by news that Malaysia might abolish the death penalty.
Kawan-kawan saya, kami dah anggap dia mati. Tapi kalau hukuman di Malaysia ni dimansuhkan, hukuman mati dah tak ada. Buat jahat macam mana pun hukuman mati tak ada. Boleh bebas, boleh balik. Kan? Kami pun boleh bunuh dia juga macam tu.
Malaysia is a secular country, but Islam, practiced by the majority of the population, is protected under the constitution. Capital punishment is allowed under Islamic or Sharia law. Idris's call for the government to retain the death penalty is supported by many from within his faith. Noor Hakimi heads the Kedah branch of Muslim rights NGO Ummah.
Dalam kes pembunuhan 2 orang kanak-kanak tadi, hukuman mati ialah yang terbaik, yang setimpal. Jika ada hukuman yang lebih berat daripada itu bagi saya, contoh gantung di depan khalayak ramai, itu ataupun yang lebih berat lagi, saya rasa sesuai untuk pembunuh itu.
Not all Muslim organizations agree though. In the capital Kuala Lumpur, we meet Dr. Ahmad Farouk Musa, founder of the Islamic Renaissance Front.
So if these people argue that because the Quran says you can kill people who murdered other people, would they also say that no, we can keep slaves because the Quran did not prohibit slavery? Islam should be compatible with the 21st century, and it should be compatible with human rights as well.
Ini lah. Tambah harga tadi. Bye.
In the eastern town of Cebu, Law Bo Ing and her husband tend to their clothing store every night. In the mornings, they're busy selling yams. The couple barely allow themselves time to rest. They say it's the only way they can stop thinking about their son.
他是我的儿子啊，是我生下来的啊，他跟我30多年啊，我多么辛苦啊！我去赚1块2块钱，送他去读大学啊，大学读了回来，刚刚赚钱啊，你们就把他谋杀去了。
Stephen Wong was a promising young bank manager whose murder shook the city. At first, Stephen's wife told the family he was killed during an attempted robbery. But his sister, Hai Huang, says they soon realized something wasn't right.
This one.
Stephen was stabbed to death in his bedroom in this house by an assailant who'd entered through an unlocked door.
大家都觉得很奇怪，家里很整齐，一点乱都没有，而且门什么都没有坏，都是好好的。
The only witnesses were Stephen's wife Ling Hang-tse and their young son. Police would eventually charge her with abetting his murder. She was sentenced to death by hanging and is now appealing the verdict. Her alleged co-conspirator and boyfriend Andrew Tiong is currently on the run. The two had apparently paid a third person to kill Stephen. That hired hand is now serving a 16-year sentence.
谁有这样啊？把我的孩子杀了，孙子还不给我啊？不给我，连看都不给我看啊！
The Wongs have since fought a contentious battle for custody of Stephen's only child. They've even prepared a room for him. But a court awarded custody of the boy to his mother's family.
所以我觉得这个小孩应该接受专业人士的辅导，真的很需要了。
It's a tragedy few can fully comprehend. The family is adamant there's only one thing that can bring them justice.
难道他的生命这么宝贵吗？我们的生命不宝贵吗？一条换一条，生命没有错。
Malaysia currently has the death penalty for 33 crimes. And for 11 of those, including murder and terrorism, judges have no option but to impose it. In 2018, a new government swept to power. It promised to give judges discretion in all cases where the death penalty is on the table. But last October, Law Minister Liu Hui-kyong went even further.
The cabinet made a decision on the 10th of October to abolish the death penalties from all the offences. Some of us believe that the killing is wrong. Once you believe in that, then you cannot allow the state to sponsor another killing.
Rita Soesilawati believes the government is making a mistake.
So beautiful, my mom.
Her mother was Soesilawati Lawiya, founder of a Malaysian cosmetics empire and the victim of a horrific murder. Soesilawati disappeared along with 3 associates in 2010. They'd gone to a farm to discuss a business deal with a lawyer, but never returned. Police believe they were killed and their bodies burnt to conceal the crime. The lawyer and 2 farmhands have since been sentenced to death for the murders.
Is there any humanity when they do that to my mom? It killed, burned my mother. When they kill, is he thinking about this lady have 6 kids in the home that waiting for her. If someone in my shoe, they're also asking eye for an eye.
Rita still lives in the same house she shared with her mother. Soesilawati's things have been left untouched.
I can feel that the memory is still there, and then I can feel that she is still here with this.
It's hard to find closure, and Rita says the government's plans for abolition have been deeply distressing.
Bila government announced it, I feel like so frustrated, so mad about it, and then I rasa macam you should know what I feel, what the family feels, what happened to us, how we grieve.
Some victims' families have been speaking up.
Is there any other questions?
Lawyer Christina Teng says a coalition was formed to give them and other retentionists a voice.
The different groups that are very concerned, mainly the victim's family, the different NGOs got together and say we need to support each other and let our voice be heard so that the government would do the right thing.
Opposition politicians are also weighing in on the issue. Wee Ka Seong is a member of parliament and a former minister.
I seek explanation from the people or from the government of the day to convince me, why do you need to abolish death penalty? We all know death penalty is a deterrent. Without that, you think our crime rate is going down?
Most Malaysians seem to agree. In a poll conducted last year by 3 major publications, 82% of 22,000 respondents opposed the government's proposal.
It is a very contentious issue. So for a pushback to come to fore, I suppose it's not surprising. But we must focus on why the government is doing it. The government is doing it because it is putting a lot of emphasis on human rights.
This is for the government to decide, and I hope that they have the courage and conviction to do what is right. The suffering that
Abdul Rashid Ismail is a lawyer and past president of the National Human Rights Society. He's also a member of Malaysia's anti-death penalty coalition.
Every legal system, since it's administered by human beings, it is prone to mistakes. The risk of executing someone who is innocent is always at the forefront of the considerations when we have death penalty.
There can be possibly innocent people who have been sentenced to death. And so
in the audience at this anti-death penalty forum are Gunalakshmi Kurupaya and her children. She's here in a desperate bid to save her husband's life. When the guest of honour, Hannah Yo, the Deputy Minister for Women, Family and Community Development, starts to leave, an emotional Gunalakshmi makes her move.
Your son?
Maka ini suami saya.
Suami kamu?
Suami saya dekat penjara sudah 15 tahun. So
penjara mana?
Penjara Kajang. So dekat semua orang saya sudah bagi sudah petition ini. So sekarang saya bagi dekat Puan tolong.
Thank you.
Okay, Puan.
Life has been a struggle ever since her husband, Mainthan, was taken away. The family still live in the same makeshift house. Gunalakshmi works as a cleaner to support her children. Agila is now 18 and still trying to understand what happened.
He accused for murder case. But I don't know the whole story. I just knew few only that Mom told me and I heard and all that.
The story is a complicated one. In August 2004, police made a gruesome discovery. Charred body parts scattered across several locations near Mainthan's house. Witnesses claimed they saw a body inside his workshop. Mainthan was eventually convicted of murder in a case built largely on circumstantial evidence. He admits assaulting a man, but insists, even today, that he never killed anyone. Then, in 2017, this man came forward. His name is Devadas, and he says it was him Mainthan assaulted 13 years earlier. For a while, Gunalakshmi believed her prayers had been answered. But the court refused to reopen her husband's case, and Mainthan remains on death row.
Kita pun sampai sekarang tak faham kenapa dia berada dekat penjara.
Kwai can't understand why her son is in prison either. When we meet her in the city of Ipoh, she's on her way to see him. It's a grueling ride for a woman in poor health. The journey takes more than 3 hours each way. But tries to go as often as she can.
我就是心痛啊，但是这个这样活泼的孩子，这样被关在监狱里10多年，很难受哦。
Yan Wai Seng, or Awai, was just 19 when he was arrested and charged with kidnapping and murder. Evidence tying him to the crime is purely circumstantial. According to court documents, Awai's boss and co-accused had used his name to lease a house, which was also their place of work. A hostage was then held and killed there. Police found strands of Awai's hair in the house. But there was no DNA evidence linking him to the crime. During the trial, testified that Awai was at home when the crime was allegedly taking place.
我说他怎么能杀人？他每天他在家，每天都得有在家，回家，晚上又见到他，白天又回。我下班的时候，煮饭的时候也是看到他的。
Awai has exhausted all avenues for appeal.
我一不舒服的时候就怕我走了，没有人看他。
Now, his mother can only hope for clemency, or for the government to amend the law. But completely abolishing the death penalty is not a priority for now. Instead, the government intends to remove only mandatory death sentences.
We decided that we should take in stages to decide that we will do the removal of the mandatory death sentence first, to give the judge to decide on capital punishment offences.
It's not a compromise Christina Teng is willing to accept.
When judges are giving discretion, they will not choose the most serious punishment, which is death penalty.
But Ma Weng Kwai, a former Court of Appeals judge who has upheld death sentences in the past, disagrees.
That was one of the arguments that was taken when it was made compulsory and mandatory. You know, the executive will say, now you don't have to worry, you just convict and then you have to pass the sentence. I think that is not quite correct. That may be an easy way out, But I think the judges must still be the conscience of the people.
Ma is also an abolitionist who believes the real problem lies with law enforcement.
You don't have to have a death penalty to have people respecting the law. I think there is really a lack of confidence in the enforcement authorities simply because of this ugly spectre of corruption, which is so pervasive, is so embedded in everything Malaysian. We will have to make sure that the systems are cleaned up and everybody has the faith in the system.
Out in the countryside in Kuantan, we meet a man who has devoted his life to helping inmates on death row. Lam Kai Chong also runs a halfway house for ex-convicts.
很多死囚包括囚犯哦，那么大多数那些死囚都是他们受的教育不是很多，他们的智商可能没有这么高，可能他们学历也没有这么高，所以往往有时候他们做的事情，他们以为他们也不懂得法律的严格的无情。
Oh, you done? Okay.
Lam spends much of his time visiting death row inmates and their families. Today, we're going with him to meet relatives of a drug offender.
Hai Makcik, selamat pagi. Bye.
Rokia Abdul Majid's husband, Zulkifli Abdul Ghani, was caught with 22 kilograms of cannabis. He told the High Court he'd given some friends a ride in his van and that the drugs belonged to them. Zulkifli was initially acquitted, but 7 years later the prosecution appealed. His daughter Nisha was 12 at the time.
Saya dapat tahu pun daripada makcik saya. Saya bawa balik sekolah. Dia cakap ayah saya tak ada. Bila saya tanya ayah saya mana, dia cakap ayah saya kena duduk dalam penjara. Itu je lah.
Of the 1,281 inmates on death row in Malaysia, more than 900 are drug offenders like Zulkifli. Some influential voices are now saying harsh laws don't work as a deterrent.
In 2012, the then Minister of Home Affairs actually said in Parliament that the death penalty is not stopping the drug trafficking trade because the numbers have been increasing. So since then, you can, if you look at the figures, from 2012 to now, 7 years later, we still have the death penalty, but the numbers are still increasing. So obviously, it is not really acting as a deterrent.
Siti Zebedah's son has been on death row for 12 years.
Nothing to say. It's only hopefully this is the way for my son to get pregnant. Let him take me to the mosque. I want to hold him then.
Razali Ahmad was found guilty of trafficking 858 grams of cannabis in 2007 and given the mandatory death sentence. An amendment in 2017 gave judges limited discretion in deciding such cases. But the change doesn't apply retroactively, and Razali remains on death row. The government's announcement last October gave Siti hope. But much has happened since then, and the fate of death row inmates remains uncertain.
That process is quite painful for those who had been waiting and waiting. So I had written a letter on the advice of the cabinet to ask the pardon board to consider giving them commutations. That's been to commute them either for life or for a period of 30 years, depending on the circumstances of that particular case.
For families of victims, these are equally trying times.
这些死去的人都是死得很惨的，
很冤枉的。你看我孩子，
必须要强制死刑，像这些罪案必须要强制死刑，不可以让法官自己做决定，这样法官会等一下会拿不定主意，该不该让他们死呢？
The government plans to table a bill in Parliament in July. How it proceeds will say much to the world about the values and priorities of Malaysia and its people.